So this is the Cooler Master MM731, a 59-gram wireless gaming mouse with a solid ergonomic shell and optical switches. All of the features and specs that would make this one of the best gaming mice that you could buy today, and it's under $100. But the reality is, this is easily one of the worst gaming mice on the market right now. So what actually got me interested in testing this thing out in the first place was after seeing the reports from customers, people who had bought the MM731 and who had reported that there was noticeable delay when moving the mouse, so sensor input delay. And since I had recently built a machine to accurately test this, I was interested to see what the honest truth and the result would be. So strapping it into the device and putting it through the testing, the result is pretty mediocre, but honestly not that bad. In wired mode, the result does improve quite a bit, but still, we're not that much slower than a lot of the other gaming mice on this list when it comes to sensor input lag. However, those reports from customers of terrible sensor responsiveness are entirely correct. I have absolutely no idea what Cooler Master have done here, but if I had to guess, I'd say that they've purposely implemented some sensor averaging and interpolation into the firmware. And the result is that the MM731 feels terrible to game with. I mean, honestly, it feels like Cooler Master, didn't even turn this thing on and play a few games with it. It is that noticeable. And the effect here is, it's not initially slow to respond as our input lag testing would suggest, but you get this constant floating and averaging effect where you're not getting much feedback from the sensor at all, and it's kind of trying to guess where the sensor should be rather than giving you an accurate input. One way that I can show you this is with Kovac's Aim Trainer, especially in scenarios which require very fast mouse input like Tile Frenzy. Now my high score here with the G Pro Superlight is around 130, and most of the time I'm able to get at least around 115. With the MM731, scores were significantly lower, and you can even see the slower input on screen. Visually, you're just not getting much feedback from the sensor at all. Again, it feels like it's maybe reading 30% of the actual sensor information and just averaging out or guessing the rest. It's also very noticeable when it comes to fast tracking scenarios. Now, I'm not that great at this scenario to begin with, but the buggy firmware on the MM731 means that I can't change direction as fast or do any micro adjustments on the fly, and the difference is very noticeable between this and really any other mouse. Here's what the same scenario looks like on the G Pro Superlight, and yeah, I'm able to stay on target a lot more often, especially when there's a fast change in direction. Plugging in the MM731, well, that fixes everything, and honestly, my scores then become very close with the G Pro Superlight. So the firmware for the MM731 is 100% different here between the wired and wireless mode. This is also the first time that I've seen a physical switch on the bottom of a gaming mouse to switch between the wired and wireless mode. Typically, there's just an on-off switch or a 2.4 GHz and Bluetooth switch, and you plug the mouse in when you need to charge it. Here though, they are completely separate modes, and I believe this might be the switch that's in fact engaging the two different firmwares. Now what is really tilting about this mouse is that the sensor averaging or interpolation or whatever is going on with the firmware in that wireless mode, that stuff needs to be programmed, tested, and implemented. It's not just some mistake that Cooler Master, did that for the MM731. They actually knowingly programmed that stuff into the firmware. Again, probably in an effort to compete with Razer and Logitech when it comes to battery saving and stuff like that. I'm not sure how they thought they'd get away with this, because honestly, it is a night and day difference between other gaming mice, let alone just between plugging the MM731 in and using it wirelessly. As for the rest of the mouse, it's okay, actually not that bad. The sensor is placed pretty far forward though, which does take a little bit of adjusting to, similar to the Razer Orochi V2. The glides are PTFE, but a little bit rough out of the box, and the buttons feel nice and light. Cooler Master are using optical switches here, so as we'd expect, input lag should be fairly good due to not having to use any debounce delay as you would with mechanical switches, and yeah, performance is good. Oddly, still outperformed by the Superlight somehow, not sure how it's slower than some mechanical switches. Realistically though, it should be on par with Razer's optical switches, but instead it's about 3 to 4 milliseconds slower. And yeah, shape-wise, honestly, a pretty comfortable mouse. About the same size as the G Pro Superlight, the main difference being it feels noticeably wider wider, especially at the base, and of course it's ergonomic and so does fill out the hand a little bit more. All of those positive points though are completely irrelevant, because the fact is that when it comes time to use this in game, it just feels like absolute garbage. You really can't aim properly with this thing at all. And you know, I'm not sure if I could ever recommend this or really any other Cooler Master mouse, especially when it comes to wireless, because at worst, this is Cooler Master trying to deceive their customer base and, you know, lie their way to the top, if you will, compete with the Razer Viper Ultimate and the G Pro Superlight. And at best, you know, Cooler Master doesn't really know what makes a good gaming mouse. Maybe they've just tried to implement some battery saving firmware and, you know, they unknowingly made the sensor and aiming really, really bad. Either way, definitely not a mouse that I can recommend, and please share this with anyone who might have it, and I will not be linking it down below in the description. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.